welcome to another episode of the Hardcore Soft Skills podcast. My name is Yadi Caro, and in each episode, I address a new skill with the help of an expert. So far, we have 80 episodes and interviews with 60 plus experts in many topics. You are listening alongside people from 80 plus countries. So let me thank you for your support and for being with me in this learning journey. Today is a fitting topic for those of us who are always eager to see what's next: reinvention. This is a skill which requires us to cultivate curiosity and adaptability. My guest has done extensive research on the topic alongside one of my former Harvard professors, Dr. Jenny Stein, and I speak with Julie Jungalwala, a leadership instructor at Harvard, the founder of the Institute for the Future of Learning, and president of the Academic Leadership Group. Today we speak about her research on reinvention and what you can do to reinvent yourself in a competitive market. Let's listen. Well, thank you so much, Julie, for being here with me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Yadi.
I'm eager to talk with you about your research and your work in the topic of reinventing ourselves and our careers, because that's such an important topic. And as a person who had kind of reinvented myself throughout the career as well, I definitely want to learn more from your perspective of what are the things that to do's and not to do's. But before we get to that, what made you decide to focus on the area of like leadership and become a leadership coach? And also you're a professor as well. So how did you decide that career path?
Well, like most people, I think it all makes sense in hindsight, but it doesn't at the time. So I remember after I did my undergrad, so I did an undergrad in business administration and French and didn't know what I wanted to do with that. And at the time I was living in Northern Ireland, that's where I grew up. And there was this wonderful export marketing program organized and funded by the European Union, where we were matched with companies in Northern Ireland who wanted to export overseas. And the consulting company that coordinated the training for that program, I remember very clearly after the first week of that training thinking, wow, I have learned more in a week than I have in the past 4 years. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was this one woman, Jillian, and she was facilitating, I think it was like a presentation skills workshop. And I thought, oh, I had no idea Jillian's job exists. What does it take to get there? That looks like a lot of fun. And again, I had no idea this kind of position in the field of adult development even existed back in the mid 1990s, but that was the start of the breadcrumb path, if you will, in this wonderful field of adult development, leadership development, and organizational development.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when it comes, how do you define the concept of adult development?
Well, I know that you're studying at Harvard as well. I did my graduate studies there, also at the Graduate School of Education. And one of my most formative classes was a class called Adult Development by Robert Keegan. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't so long ago, maybe just in the last 40-ish years, when, largely as a result of Keegan and others' research, where they really debunked this myth that by the age of about 21, 22, 23, you're fully baked, cooked, as it were, and you go off into the world and that's it, no more development for you. Mm-hmm. But rather there are different stages and phases that we go through as adults. And I love Keegan's framework and his model, where he talks about the socialized phase, the self-authoring phase, and then the self-transformational phase. And that really helped to put into context a lot of what I was experiencing and noticing with my coaching clients, and also in some of the team building and leadership work that we were doing. So I don't know how I would define adult development. Maybe we all go through developmental stages. Some of us go through more stages than others. A lot of it depends on the conditions in which we find ourselves and the container, for want of a better word. But there are many developmental stages that we can go through and that are at our disposal as adults.
Yeah. Let's dig deeper on that, because you mentioned the 3 stages from Keegan are the socialized phase, and what were the other 2?
So socialized mind,
Mhm.
self-authoring mind, and self-transformational mind.
Could you talk a little bit about each?
Sure. So socialized, well, to take it back a little bit further, there are
Mhm.
5 stages that Keegan references: childhood, adolescence, socialized mind, self-authoring mind, and self-transformational mind.
Mhm.
So socialized mind, Keegan describes it as this wonderful stage that parents like to see when their children realize, oh, there's more than me in the world that I need to think about. There are other people, other people's values, considerations, and so forth. So with the socialized mind, we're mindful of the group. We're mindful of the values. We're mindful of how do I show up here. Very much taking that into account. Uh, if you take that into a typical sort of workplace scenario, if I'm in a meeting with socialized mind, I'll be very mindful of how other people are viewing the decision at the table. Which way do I lean here? I'm taking that more into account, probably compared to what do I think is the right decision here, and that would speak to more of a self-authoring stance, which is I'm very clear on my values and very clear on where I stand here, and I will come from that place, even if the other 7 people at this table disagree with me. That's okay. My sense of value isn't based uh, on what they think. And then self-transformational is, yes, I know my values, and I know what I think about this, and I'm very grounded in that. And I'm open to seeing it entirely differently. Who knows how I might be transformed by this conversation. So according to Keegan's research, the majority of adults are somewhere in the socialized minds, self-authoring mind space. And if we live longer than 70, then we might be entering into more of the self-transformational space. So I think it gives me hope for humanity because we're living longer. Therefore, we have more opportunity to develop and grow as we get older.
Is there, on that particular phase of the transformation phase, so are those natural progressions, or is there a deliberate effort that it will take to go from stage as an adult, that to realize that it's not all about us, like the maturity part of the whole adulthood. So are those natural stages, or is there a specific effort and skill required for each?
Yeah, I think it's both. So if you find yourself in a place where, well, let me go back to my own context here. What I see in organizations, particularly today, and this goes back to the reinvention research, and you probably read and experienced this yourself as well, through everything that's happened just in the past 3 years, the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, so on and so forth, is a lot more people thinking, hold on a minute, what do I actually want? That's a great self-authoring type question that you're asking yourself. You might not frame it with that language, but you're asking yourself, well, do I want to get up at this time every day and get into this car and drive this hour and a half to this job that I don't particularly like, and then drive home and not see my kids and do that 5 days a week and be exhausted? Uh, Maybe yes, maybe no. And the whole frame I think that we're in right now is the tectonic plates are shifting organizationally, where more and more people are asking themselves in first principles, what do I want my day to look like, my week? Uh, Even thinking of, I've heard people talk about, well, uh, this whole idea of I work the best years of my life and then I retire. That doesn't make any sense, particularly given that we'll be living longer. What if I took a sabbatical for the next month, 3 months, if it's financially viable, maybe even for longer than that? What might be possible then? So there is a lot more self-authoring happening that I've noticed. I've been doing this work for about 20 plus years. I've noticed a lot more self-authoring conversations and questions in the last 3 years as a result of the entire world going through what I believe is a reset, if we will embrace it.
And is that a good thing, in terms of how, asking those questions, or are there wrong ways to look at those particular questions? That is that a good thing overall, that we're questioning our, the way we are doing things, or perhaps will it take us through a wrong path?
Mm. I'm a coach, so I think they're good questions. Other people might disagree with me, but I think you live your life in the direction of your questions. So I would take it sort of a step backwards and say, well, what are the questions you're asking yourself? Are those questions serving you? If yes, great. If not, what might a different question be that would serve you?
That's a great way to present that in terms of asking questions of ourselves that will serve us.
Mm-hmm.
And could you talk a little bit about your research and the findings that you mentioned that there's a lot of more either eagerness for transformation within ourselves. Could you tell us a little bit more about your research when it comes to reinvention?
Sure. So we interviewed 47 people who had reinvented themselves in the past. And we very purposefully interviewed a broad, diverse range of people. And we were curious to find out, are there phases or stages that are predictable that people go through whenever they're experiencing this reinvention? And also, how might organizations be incubators of this process? There are billions of people employed. I would love to see organizations embrace this kind of developmental edge a lot more than what we've typically done in the past. So it was fascinating what we found. Yes, there are phases, and briefly stated, they are not knowing. So back to your question about questions, you might experience this yourself, Yadi, in a previous reinvention, where what you were doing, which maybe previously was great and it felt good and you're in your groove, and then you start to feel less in your groove. Something's not, it's not off. It doesn't suck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But something just is starting to feel a little bit off. So that's the gradual not knowing. Then there's the abrupt not knowing, which is you've been let off, or something just came in from just blindsided you in a relationship where what just happened. That's a bit more sudden. So it can be sudden or it can be gradual. And then the next phase is letting go. So this is very counter to our Western
Mm-hmm.
training, as it were, where you let go when you know that you need some certainty to let go. But the juice here is you don't know, and then you let go of that which no longer serves you. And that can be scary as all get out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what exactly is not working. I don't know what's next, and I need to let go. In the case of maybe being let off or a relationship not working out, that can be really difficult. I've seen people be let off and they sort of hung on to that old identity, that job, maybe that organization. Folks who have held on to a relationship that it can be exceptionally difficult to let go of. So that's the second phase. And then the third phase, this is my favorite one, exploration, which is all about, well, okay, let me start to try new things. All of a sudden, I feel like going to a yoga class, or I'm picking up books on a different topic, or I'm meeting these people and they're really interesting. And these conversations are fascinating to me. And I'm remembering this from my past. I'm going to pick this back up, or something entirely new. And then the final phase is gathering. That's where you're sort of sifting through it all, maybe starting to get some clarity with regards to what might be next, making some decisions, taking approach to how do I start to move forward with what I've just explored. Now, it's not linear. You might be going through all four simultaneously in a given day. You might have a full day of I don't know anything, and it's just, my life sucks right now. There might be, weeks or months of exploration, and being very much in that phase. There might be an extended period of gathering. So there's no time frame. There's no step by step model to follow, as it were, but I found those 4 phases to be illuminating. It helps to have a map when you're going through a reinvention. I think they provide a helpful map.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch upon that fear of the letting go part because a lot of us get stuck on that part and
Mhm.
not even allow ourselves to go into the exploration phase. What are some of the recommendations you have so we can give permission to ourselves to go into explore and start really letting go?
Yes. So couple of recommendations. People approach this differently. So some folks are actually, they're happy to let go. Great, good wins. There's no issue here. Other folks like me need a little bit more scaffolding. So what I would say is, when it comes to letting go, give yourself permission to imagine something new. And you're not committing to it yet. So sometimes we think if we imagine something, then we have to commit to it and follow through. And that can be unhelpful at this stage. So just imagine something different that might be calling you. It's much easier to let go when you're moving towards something, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, when it comes to imagining that or kind of trying to make it as guess attainable as possible, because even what happens when we have that fear that we're imagining those things and then we think like, nah, never gonna happen. To me, never. So how do we address that?
2 things. One, give yourself permission to dream and to dream big. I believe if there's a vision that you have for yourself, there's a reason that you have that vision. Now, it can seem terribly overwhelming sometimes because you're starting here and the vision is super big. And how do I even begin to move in that direction? It can seem really overwhelming, and then we tend to shut ourselves down pretty quickly. So I would say, don't compromise on your vision, and give yourself permission to take the tiniest of baby steps towards the vision. I remember, for example, a previous job that I worked in that I loved for many years. Great team, great organization. And then just gradually over time, it wasn't the perfect fit that it was. And I started to use my vacation time and my personal days to explore other things. I'm pretty risk averse. I'm not a jump on the net will appear kind of person. I'm more like, well, let me go off and sew a net over here and attach it to something, and I consider taking a leap. So I did that for 2 years. And then I reached the point where I realized, now I need to let go of this safety and to give this new thing a full-time chance. And it wasn't easy. I'm not going to lie. But I felt like I'd done enough groundwork to feel confident doing that.
That's a wonderful approach of kind of like safety, kind of touching the water here, and while we're still safely on the other side. In your work and in some of the articles, you have talked about the concept of the operating system of our own operating systems. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So this is grounded in Richard Schwartz's work in internal family systems, and the language that I like to use is like an internal operating system that we all have it, and sometimes we're conscious of it, and sometimes we're not. So if we take an example of, let's say you have a vision for something new in your life, but a new job, a new studying something different, moving somewhere, whatever the goal is. You can make this really practical by just jotting that goal down in the middle of a piece of paper, and then just jot down around it all of the thoughts that occur to you when you think of that goal. So if we take my example of leaving a secure job to start a business, here's the internal loop that's going through my head. That's crazy. How will you pay the mortgage? Startup has a high failure rate. How do you know you'll be successful? Oh, I'd really love to do this. Oh, I could do this kind of work. Oh, I could craft my day this way. So you're getting all of those thoughts down on paper. And then you're starting to see, okay, this is the internal operating system. And think of yourself as the chair of this. So it's like a board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these directors have a voice, and some are helpful and some are not. Which ones am I listening to? Which ones are helping me decide how to move forward? Which ones are helpful? Which ones are not helpful? And the negative can be helpful. So how will you pay the mortgage? I don't know, but let me look at my finances. Let me see if I can build up an emergency fund. How can I take that voice, that part of my system, and have it be an ally as I move forward in this work? So first of all, mapping your internal operating system, understanding that it's all there to serve you in some way, shape, or form. And how can I start to bring all of that wisdom to the fore as I move forward in this next stage of my journey?
That's wonderful. So mapping, identifying, and then I like the concept of kind of assuming other roles in your board of directors to kind of help you think through a particular situation and possibilities. What are some skills that you consider will be good to have or develop and practice as we go from one phase of the exploring into actually like the phases of the reinvention? What are some skills that we should develop on that?
So the skill of adaptability is critical. And again, our education system currently doesn't do a great job of this. There is still very much this, get good grades, go to college, decide on a path, and don't veer too much off that path. So it's still a bit counterculture to try something entirely different. Even though we all know that we're going to have multiple jobs and multiple careers in a lifetime, there still is this sense of, well, hold on a minute, you studied for a law degree, and now 10 years later, you want to be a photographer. There's a lot of judgment that goes along with that. So the adaptability, really building that skill set. Another skill set that, again, I don't think gets a whole lot of attention as much as it should is really grounding yourself in your own somatic wisdom. So your body, there's a lot of wisdom there. And it's something that I'm starting to learn a lot more about myself. There's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it was the top selling book in the medicine section, I think, last year, which is fascinating. That our intuition is guiding us all the time. And it's an incredible skill set to begin to tap into that. And again, it's something that as adults, we typically have to go out and find for ourselves and get that support, because it's not something we learn through the traditional education system as it exists.
Yeah, absolutely. So becoming adaptable, basically, it's extremely important. And yeah, that listening, I like when you mentioned that in terms of we have the wisdom, that we hold wisdom, that we should be able to tap into that. It's a skill, because sometimes we don't necessarily kind of practice that frequently. So does it require that we basically just remind ourselves that we have that and kind of like continue practicing that?
Yes, and I think that's where a lot of the mindfulness work is really getting so much traction. That's what we're doing essentially, is slowing the monkey mind down enough to be able to really tap into ourselves. And I think it's no accident we're going through a mental health crisis right now, because we're not doing this. The meditation apps are proliferating in the App Store, and the pace of change. Oftentimes people say, well, the pace of change has always been fast. We had TVs, and then we had just all the technology that has emerged over the centuries. But the research is telling us the rate of change is exponential. What used to happen in 2 to 3 lifetimes is now happening in 1 lifetime, half a lifetime. I was reading the other day that Facebook took whatever number of time to get 1 million users. ChatGPT took 5 days, I think. So the exponential rate of change.
Yeah.
Our human capacity to keep up or to hold all of this needs to catch up. And ironically, that means slowing down enough to be able to do that, which is counterintuitive, but it's what works. So
Yeah, quite challenging, but possible.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And what are some of the other key findings that you want to share in regards of your reinvention research?
Sure. So another thing that we found was that not everybody goes through reinvention in the same way. So some folks have much more of a gung ho, yep, burn the boats, let's go, let's make it happen. Other folks are much more, well, hold on, let me see, let me scope this out in a different kind of way. Other folks might be a combination of both. So we all go through it different ways, and we're working on a number of different articles where we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. Um, but that was fascinating. That was fascinating to me. And then also this concept of reinvention balance. Are you somatically grounded? And are you able to access the wisdom? And also, there's another key piece that came up was the importance of who you're surrounding yourself with as you go through this process. So there are people who will be supportive, and there are people who will not. And yes, sometimes it's not black or white choice to suddenly carve people out of your life. That's not reasonable in many circumstances. But I would ask people, is there at least one person who supports this next version of you that's taking shape and form? And if you have at least one person, that will be super helpful. Because again, culturally, there still isn't a whole lot of support for being fully self-authoring and going forth and do something different, because we're typically surrounded by people who've supported the older version of who you are. And they might be threatened, they might be triggered, they might not be on board with what's coming next. Oftentimes, if somebody's going through a reinvention, it can be a mirror to other folks. Are you fully on board with everything in your life right now? And that might bring up some questions, some self-reflection, and some folks embrace that, and others might not. They might not be in a position or a place in their life where that's where their focus is.
Yeah, that's interesting in terms of having that person to be able to support that, or makes it a little bit more difficult if there's not
Mm-hmm.
that possibility there. Um, oops. What are some of the other areas of the research that were explored, or were uh, surprising, perhaps, of the research?
So even though we approach it differently, there's not one single way that folks approach it. I was struck by the humanity in every one of the interviews, where everybody at some point in time, it required a leap of faith. So this whole question of faith, that was surprising to me, and it reminded me. Years ago, I had a conversation with a guy who was an expert in systems thinking, and we were talking about Peter Senge's 5 disciplines, and he said, I think there might be a 6th discipline. And I remember it was a lunch in New York. It was 2011, and I just had this thought when he said it: faith. That I didn't say it at the table, but just it stuck with me, that I think the 6th discipline could be faith. And when you look at systems thinking, personal mastery, team learning, shared vision, mental models, faith is the connective tissue. Do you have faith in that vision that will take you because because you're on your developmental edge, you're on your developmental edge. Therefore, you don't know exactly how to get there. Therefore, it's not going to be easy. And there's incredible learning, joy, excitement, possibility. And faith is what will get you through. Faith in the vision, faith in yourself.
That is wonderful. That the aspect of kind of like the intangible is
Yes.
important.
Yes.
And before we go, I wanna, if people wanted to know more information about your research or i- just overall about your work and know more details about it, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. We're still in the early days, Yadi, of building a website and starting to get the information out there. I would say for now, if you go to the Forbes website and just do a search on my name, you'll see the articles there under the Coaches Council section where I talk about the reinvention research and what we're finding.
That is wonderful, and I look forward to continue seeing and see the final result. Absolutely, because this is such an important topic today. It just seems that there's so much need for reinvention as we, you know, it's still dealing with the results of COVID, how they affected our lives. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for having me, Yadi. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. Before you leave, make sure you go to my website, hardcoresoftskillspodcast.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Then go to the review tab and leave a review. It is the way to ensure this podcast is discovered by others. Remember that by learning soft skills, you make your hard skills work for you. See you next time.